Today I'm at the LA Auto Show and I've finally been able to see the 2024 Sonata in person. This model was launched internationally a short while ago, but I've actually been able to get up close and personal with it. Now, let's talk about the design first. Obviously, more angular and less catfish going on up front. This generation Sonata was pretty controversial when it launched, with that really long and really wide grille up front. This, I think, is certainly more in keeping with the rest of the Hyundai family. We still have a big light pipe, but it no longer goes back across the roofline, so they actually have changed some of the sheet metal here as well. Instead, it's just up front, a little bit more in line with what we find in the Ioniq lineup. Headlights are down here. Turn signals pretty low on the bumper. Now, the angular theme that we've seen from Hyundai is continuing and has sort of been grafted onto the Sonata, which I think had more of a flowing style than we find in this refresh model. So we have some pretty sharp creases on the front fenders, etc. There is still going to be an N-line model, there is still going to be a hybrid model, and there is still going to be a naturally aspirated model. But the 1.6-liter turbo has now been removed from the lineup. Let's go around the rest of the styling here. You can see that we have very similar lines to before, but things have been a little bit sharpened here and there. Out back, we have a pretty thorough refresh as well. We have a completely different rear bumper, sort of an integrated ducktail spoiler here on the back. It's not quite as steep as it seemed in the past. A little button to release the trunk is right there in the middle of everything. And this model is the hybrid model. So this one has a power trunk lid that's going to be optional there. And you can see that the pixel theme that has been migrated from some of the EVs is integrated here into the Sonata, only we have more of a horizontal style pixel theme and these little sort of hammerhead ends to that entire light module. Under the hood, there are going to be three engines. Things are going to start out with a naturally aspirated 2.5-liter engine that's going to give you 191 horsepower, and it's going to be mated to either your choice of front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. Yep, you can now get an all-wheel drive Sonata. Unfortunately, that all-wheel drive system is not going to be integrated with the optional 2.5-liter turbocharged engine that gives you 290 horsepower. So if you want the N-line, it still exists, but we don't gain all-wheel drive. Then we have the absolutely excellent hybrid system. This is the model that gives the Sonata about 50 miles per gallon in real-world driving, with performance pretty similar to the base engine. You'll get 192 horsepower. Interesting twist, if you want a hybrid, but you don't like the feel of a continuously variable automatic transmission, you want to take a look at the Sonata with the hybrid rather than the Camry, which has now gone all hybrid for 2024. Because this system continues to use a traditional stepped automatic transmission, not the CVT-like setup that we find in the Toyota Camry. So this has a much more traditional feel. Also, if you get all-wheel drive in this, it is going to be a traditional mechanical all-wheel drive system, not an e-axle like we find in the Camry. Rather unfortunately, you cannot, however, combine the hybrid and all-wheel drive, at least not yet in the Sonata. The interior also receives a fairly thorough refresh. You can see that the front door design is not too far removed from what we find in the current Sonata, but the dashboard design is definitely different. We find this sort of two-tiered theme here, where we find kind of a knurled metal effect trim. This is not actually metal, it is plastic, and then a stitched upper dashboard component. We then have the integrated two-screen look that we find in the Ioniq lineup moved over here to the Sonata as well. Over here we find the infotainment and navigation screen. Rather unfortunately, I don't have the key for this car, so I can't turn on the instrument cluster, but it would be essentially the same software we find in other models. And we also have this little fabric panel over here that we first started to see in vehicles like the Elantra. Down here we have the controls for the dual zone automatic climate control system, and this vehicle is getting the next generation Hyundai infotainment system. So I'm going to guess that this model will have wireless Apple CarPlay. It seems to be the way you could tell the difference in the newer Hyundais is this little button right here. Whether this charge port is just a charge port or a USB interface port, that seems to be the hallmark that you have the newer system. We also have a revised center console. So down here we find the drive mode toggle, auto brake hold, 360-degree camera button, then two big cup holders and a little wrist rest right here that doesn't open, it's just a wrist rest. And then over here we have an opening center console with a little bit of extra storage. The Sonata still offers a large panoramic moonroof, which is definitely a nice touch, especially in this hybrid model. And let's go ahead and take a look at the seating position in the back. Back here we have Travis in the rear. How's your headroom back there?
I'm touching the top, but I still fit.
Yep, just touching the ceiling. That's not too bad. How was that versus the Camry? We were just in the Camry yesterday.
So it's a little bit tighter than the Camry, it feels like.
Yeah, a little bit tighter. That sounds about right. A little bit tighter than the Camry. Decent leg room back there, of course, and not too much of a driveline hump in the middle. And the Sonata still has a pretty decently sized trunk. You can see it definitely gets wider right there towards the tail lamp area, and you can definitely put a lot of luggage in the back. I would suspect, though, that the Camry's cargo area is maybe just a little bit larger. Let me know what you think of the new Sonata, and let me know whether you'd rather have a Sonata or the relatively stylish new Camry. I have to say that the very style-forward Camry surprised me because I like just about everything about the look of that new model. And this Sonata was a little controversial when it launched, and they have certainly made it less controversial with this refresh, but it still has some angles that not everybody might be a fan of. Not everybody seems to be a fan of the more angular design that we also find on the Hyundai Elantra, or the more parametric, more pixelated look on the front end. Price-wise, this is going to probably be pretty close to the Camry when comparably equipped. Remember though that this is going to offer a non-hybrid drivetrain. So if for some reason you just don't want to save fuel, you could get something like this over the all-hybrid Camry. On the other hand, remember that the Camry's MSRP is probably going to tick way up because of that standard hybrid system, so base Sonata is likely going to be less expensive. Let me know what you think about that, and of course check out our video on the new Camry if you haven't seen it, and stay tuned for an upcoming Camry Sonata versus Accord battle. I'm really interested to see how the mid-size sedan segment heats up because we have the new Accord, we have the new Camry, and now we have a pretty decently refreshed Sonata.